The autumn breeze rustled through the trees as a young boy stood at the entrance of Riverside Elementary School, clutching his backpack straps tightly. His dark eyes sparkled with a mix of excitement and nervousness, the kind that only comes with being the new kid at school. At just 11 years old, he carried himself with quiet confidence, something he'd learned from watching his father over the years. Inside the bright hallways decorated with student artwork and motivational posters, Mrs. Thompson, the school secretary, warmly welcomed him to classroom 5B. "You're going to love it here," she said with a genuine smile, leading him through the corridor. The boy nodded politely, keeping to himself the fact that he already knew quite a bit about the school. After all, his father had just become the new principal. The decision to keep their relationship private had been made over breakfast that morning. "Let's give you a chance to make your own way," his father had said, adjusting his tie in the kitchen mirror. "You don't need my title hanging over your head." The boy had agreed, understanding the wisdom in his father's words, though he couldn't help but feel a little proud of their secret. As they approached classroom 5B, the sound of children's chatter grew louder. Ms. Walsh, a teacher with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun and wire-rimmed glasses perched on her nose, stood at the door. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes as she looked down at her new student. "So you're the transfer from Oak Ridge," she said, reviewing his paperwork with pursed lips. The classroom fell quiet as he walked in. 24 pairs of curious eyes followed him to the front of the room. Ms. Walsh cleared her throat and announced, "Class, we have a new student joining us today." Her introduction was brief, almost dismissive, before she pointed him to a desk at the very back of the room, despite several empty seats in the front rows. Throughout that first morning, the boy's hand shot up repeatedly during math class. He loved numbers and had always excelled at problem-solving. But each time, Ms. Walsh's eyes seemed to skip over him, calling on other students instead. When she finally acknowledged him during a particularly challenging question about fractions, her eyebrows rose in surprise as he delivered the correct answer without hesitation. During lunch break, a friendly girl with braids and a bright yellow headband invited him to sit at her table. "Don't worry about Ms. Walsh," she whispered, sharing her cookies with him. "She's like that sometimes, but we're not all like that here." Her words carried a weight that seemed beyond her years, and the boy appreciated her kindness. As the afternoon wore on, the boy noticed more subtle things about Ms. Walsh's behavior. When he turned in his worksheet early, she double-checked every answer, something she hadn't done with other students' work. When he raised his hand to volunteer for classroom duties, she overlooked him in favor of students who hadn't even volunteered. Each interaction felt like a tiny paper cut, small enough to dismiss individually, but increasingly painful when added together. At the end of the day, as he packed up his books, he overheard Ms. Walsh talking to another teacher in the hallway. "The new student," she said, her voice carrying through the open door. "Well, we'll see how long he lasts. These transfer students often struggle to keep up with our standards." The boy's hands slowed as he zipped up his backpack, his father's morning words echoing in his mind. "Sometimes, son, the best response is to prove them wrong with excellence." He straightened his shoulders and walked out of the classroom, politely saying goodbye to Ms. Walsh, despite her earlier comments. Walking down the hallway toward the main office where he would meet his father, the boy felt a mix of emotions. He was disappointed by Ms. Walsh's treatment, but determined not to let it affect his performance. He thought about telling his father, but decided to give it time, to prove himself first, just as they had discussed. Little did Ms. Walsh know that every report she would write, every comment she would make, and every action she would take would eventually find its way to the principal's desk. The boy smiled slightly, knowing that sometimes the best lessons in life come unexpectedly, and not just for the students. As he pushed open the heavy doors to the main office, he caught a glimpse of his father through the principal's office window. Their eyes met briefly, and his father gave him a subtle nod, their secret signal asking if everything was okay. The boy nodded back, already looking forward to their drive home when he could share the details of his interesting first day. This was just the beginning of what would become a powerful lesson for everyone at Riverside Elementary. one that would remind them that appearances can be deceiving, assumptions can be wrong, and change often comes from the most unexpected situations. As autumn leaves continued to fall outside the classroom windows of Riverside Elementary, the atmosphere inside room 5B grew increasingly tense with each passing day. The new student had been there for 3 weeks now, and his presence seemed to create an invisible wall between Ms. Walsh and her usually harmonious classroom. Every morning began the same way. The boy would arrive early, perfectly prepared with completed homework and organized materials. He'd greet Ms. Walsh with a polite good morning, only to receive a curt nod in return. His classmates noticed the stark difference between how she warmly welcomed others and the cold shoulder she gave him. During one particularly memorable math lesson, the boy solved a complex problem about percentages on the whiteboard. His method was different from what Ms. Walsh had taught, but it was equally valid and even more efficient. Instead of praising his creative thinking, she frowned and said, "We stick to the methods I teach in this classroom." The other students exchanged confused glances. They'd seen her praise creative solutions from others before. A kind-hearted girl with glasses who sat near him started keeping a small notebook. "I'm writing down everything," she whispered one day during art class. "My mom says sometimes grown-ups need proof when they do wrong things." The boy felt touched by her support, but also sad that someone so young already understood the need to document unfairness. The science fair was approaching, and students were buzzing with excitement about their projects. The boy had chosen to demonstrate how solar panels work, inspired by his father's recent installation of them at their home. When he presented his idea to Ms. Walsh, she barely looked at his carefully drawn plans. "Perhaps something simpler would be more appropriate for you," she suggested, her tone dripping with doubt. "Maybe a basic plant growth experiment." Several students who had chosen similar simple projects received enthusiastic approval from her just moments before. The classroom dynamics began to shift subtly. During group work, more students started choosing to partner with the boy, impressed by his helpful nature and quick understanding of difficult concepts. This seemed to irritate Ms. Walsh even more. She began rearranging groups herself, consistently placing him with struggling students while claiming it was to help them improve. One rainy Tuesday, the boy stayed behind during lunch to help clean up a spilled paint tray. As he worked quietly, he overheard Ms. Walsh speaking to another teacher in the hallway. "I just don't understand why they placed him in my advanced class," she said, her voice carrying through the crack in the door. "These transfer students usually need extra support, not advanced placement." The boy's hands slowed as he wiped up the last of the paint. His test scores had been consistently at the top of the class, and he'd even helped tutor other students during study period. The unfairness of her words stung, but he remembered his father's advice about dignity and perseverance. During computer lab sessions, while other students received immediate help with technical issues, the boy would raise his hand and wait, and wait, and wait. Eventually, he learned to solve problems on his own or quietly ask classmates for help. His independence seemed to further aggravate Ms. Walsh, who would make pointed comments about students who think they don't need teacher support. The breaking point came during a history presentation. The boy had prepared a comprehensive report about civil rights movements around the world. His research was thorough, his presentation slides were professional, and his delivery was confident. As he finished speaking, the class burst into spontaneous applause, something that hadn't happened for any other presentation. Ms. Walsh's reaction was immediate and harsh. While the presentation was adequate, she said, emphasizing the word with a slight sneer, "In the future, please stick to the basic requirements rather than trying to show off." The classroom fell silent, the earlier enthusiasm crushed under the weight of her words. That afternoon, a small group of students waited for the boy after school. "We're going to tell our parents," said a boy with freckles who rarely spoke up in class. "This isn't right, and they need to know." Others nodded in agreement, their young faces serious with the understanding that they were witnessing something wrong. The boy thanked them but asked them to wait. "Let's see if things get better," he said, knowing that his father's position would eventually bring everything to light. He didn't want to rush the process. Each day was building a clearer picture of Ms. Walsh's behavior. As he walked to the office to meet his father, he passed the school's mission statement painted on the wall: "Nurturing minds, embracing differences, building futures." The irony wasn't lost on him, but he also knew that sometimes the best lessons about these values come from seeing what happens when people fail to live up to them. His father noticed his quieter demeanor during their drive home. Sometimes, his father said, breaking their usual comfortable silence, the strongest response to unfairness is to continue doing your best while letting others show their true colors. The boy nodded, understanding that this situation was teaching him more than just academic lessons. Little did Ms. Walsh know, her actions were creating ripples throughout the school community. Parents were talking, students were watching, and documentation was building. The truth had a way of surfacing, and when it did, it would bring changes that would affect everyone at Riverside Elementary. The crisp morning air filled room 5B as students filed in for what would become one of the most memorable days at Riverside Elementary. The art supply cabinet stood open, filled with fresh materials for the day's special project, creating three-dimensional paper sculptures. Everyone was excited, especially the new student who had already sketched out his design ideas during breakfast. Ms. Walsh stood at the front of the room, sorting through colorful paper and bottles of glue. "Remember," she announced, her voice carrying its usual stern tone, "these are expensive materials. We must use them wisely." Her eyes lingered on the boy in the back row as she spoke, though he sat perfectly still, hands folded on his desk. The class buzzed with creative energy as students collected their supplies. When it was the boy's turn, he carefully selected his materials: blue construction paper, scissors, and a small bottle of craft glue. He had planned to create an intricate geometric design inspired by the architecture books in his father's study. As he worked diligently on his project, Ms. Walsh circled the room, offering praise and suggestions to other students. When she reached his desk, her expression hardened. "That's far too much paper," she declared, though he had taken the same amount as everyone else. "And you're using too much glue. This isn't how we do things here." Before he could explain his design plan, she swiftly gathered his materials, leaving only a single sheet of paper and a small dab of glue. "We can't waste supplies on overly ambitious projects," she announced loudly, making several students look up from their work. The boy sat quietly, his carefully planned design now impossible to complete. During morning break, Ms. Walsh left the classroom for a faculty meeting. Students chatted quietly while working on their projects. The boy noticed a younger student from another class dart into the room, apparently looking for their teacher. The child seemed nervous, accidentally bumping into Ms. Walsh's desk before quickly leaving. When Ms. Walsh returned, she headed straight for her chair. The boy noticed something odd about the way she moved, as if she was stuck. A horrified gasp echoed through the classroom as she realized what had happened. Her favorite cardigan was firmly glued to the chair's surface. The room fell silent as Ms. Walsh's face turned red with anger. Without any investigation or questions, she turned directly to the boy. "You," she said, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. "I step out for 10 minutes and this is what you do." "But I didn't," he began, only to be cut off. "Silence," she snapped. "I've had enough of your disruptive behavior. First wasting supplies and now this?" She pointed to the door. "To the principal's office. Now." The other students watched in shocked silence as their classmate gathered his belongings. A few tried to speak up. Ms. Walsh, he was working on his project the whole time, but she silenced them with a stern look. As the boy walked to the office, his steps were steady despite the storm of emotions inside him. He knew the truth would come out. There were security cameras in the hallways, and several students had seen him working quietly at his desk. More importantly, he knew who would be reviewing this incident. In the main office, the secretary looked up sympathetically as he entered. She had grown fond of the quiet, polite boy who always greeted her with a smile. "You're far. The principal will see you shortly," she caught herself, maintaining their agreed-upon privacy. While waiting, he could hear Ms. Walsh's voice from the hallway, growing louder as she approached the office. She had apparently called for a substitute to watch her class while she came to press her case. Her cardigan was now off, but still showed signs of the glue incident. What Ms. Walsh didn't know was that the morning's events had been captured by more than just witnesses. The security camera outside room 5B had recorded everything, including the nervous young student's brief entry during the break. The truth was safely documented, waiting to be revealed. The boy sat calmly, remembering all the times his father had told him about the importance of truth and patience. He thought about how this moment would become part of a bigger story, one about assumptions, fairness, and the importance of looking beyond surface judgments. Through the office window, he could see his father's silhouette, standing tall and professional. Soon, Ms. Walsh would learn an important lesson about jumping to conclusions and treating students unfairly. But more than that, everyone would learn something about dignity, justice, and the power of maintaining your integrity even when others doubt you. As Ms. Walsh burst into the office, ready to demand serious consequences, she had no idea that she was about to face her own moment of truth. The boy felt a strange sense of calm, knowing that sometimes the best response to injustice is simply to let the truth reveal itself in its own time. The secretary buzzed through to the principal's office. "Sir, Ms. Walsh and the student are here to see you." There was a slight pause before she added, "And I believe you'll want to review the security footage from this morning before the meeting begins." The stage was set for a revelation that would change not just one classroom, but the entire culture of Riverside Elementary. As the boy waited to be called in, he thought about how this moment would affect not just his own future, but the future of every student who might otherwise face similar unfair treatment. The principal's office at Riverside Elementary was quiet except for the gentle hum of the computer and the ticking of the wall clock. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the Venetian blinds as the principal reviewed the security footage from that morning. His fingers drummed softly on the desk as he watched the hallway camera feed, his expression remaining professionally neutral despite the stakes involved. On his desk lay Ms. Walsh's hastily written incident report, filled with accusations against his son. Next to it sat a stack of previous complaints and observations he'd been quietly collecting over the past few weeks. Each document told part of a larger story, one of bias, unfair treatment, and rushed judgments. The security footage played on his screen showing the quiet morning hallway. There, at exactly 10:15 a.m. during the faculty meeting, a small figure appeared. It was a younger student, clearly lost and looking for their teacher. The child entered room 5B briefly, bumping against the teacher's desk before hurrying out. The principal paused the footage, zooming in to see the young student accidentally knocking over something near Ms. Walsh's chair. He pressed the intercom button. "Could you please locate the second-grade student who was running errands for Mrs. Chen this morning?" His voice remained steady, professional, not betraying that this investigation involved his own child. While waiting, he reviewed the classroom footage. His son remained visible at his desk throughout the entire break, focused on his art project. Other students could be seen working, chatting, but no one approached the teacher's desk except for the lost second grader. A soft knock interrupted his review. The young second grader entered, eyes wide with worry, accompanied by their teacher. "Am I in trouble?" the child asked, voice trembling slightly. The principal smiled warmly. "Not at all. I just need to understand what happened when you were looking for your teacher this morning. Can you tell me about that?" The child's story came out in nervous bursts. They had been delivering supplies to teachers, got confused about the room numbers, and entered the wrong classroom. "I was carrying the craft supplies," they explained, "and I bumped into the desk. The glue bottle fell over, but I was too scared to say anything, so I ran out." The principal nodded understanding, thanked the child, and assured them they weren't in trouble. After they left, he reviewed more footage, this time from the past few weeks. He watched countless small interactions, his son being overlooked despite raised hands, moved to the back of the room despite empty front seats, questioned more harshly than other students. Down the hall, Ms. Walsh waited with barely contained impatience, still unaware that her accused student was the principal's son. She had changed out of her glue-stained cardigan into a spare sweater kept in her classroom cabinet, her posture rigid with righteous indignation. The principal pulled up the school's security camera software one more time, this time focusing on the past few weeks. He documented every instance of differential treatment, the times his son was ignored, the moments of unfair scrutiny, the pattern of assumptions that had led to this moment. He thought back to their breakfast conversations, where his son had shared small details about his day, never complaining, always looking for ways to prove himself through excellence rather than protest. Pride swelled in his chest at his son's dignity in the face of unfairness, but it was tinged with sadness that such strength had been necessary. The secretary's voice came through the intercom again. "Sir, Ms. Walsh is asking how much longer she needs to wait. She says she has a class to return to. Please let her know I'll see them both in 5 minutes," he replied, his voice carrying no hint of the personal stakes involved. He spent those minutes organizing his evidence: the security footage, the incident reports, the documented pattern of behavior. Everything was laid out with professional precision. In the outer office, his son sat quietly reading a book, maintaining his composure despite the unfair accusation. Other staff members passed through, some offering sympathetic glances. They had witnessed Ms. Walsh's behavior over the weeks, but hadn't realized the full pattern until now. The principal stood at his window, watching the playground where children played freely, unconcerned with the drama unfolding in the administrative offices. He thought about how this moment would affect not just his son, not just Ms. Walsh, but the entire school community. It was a chance to address something bigger than a simple misunderstanding about glue. His computer chimed with an email from the school board, confirming receipt of his documentation about the ongoing situation. Everything was in place for what would happen next. This wasn't just about defending his son. It was about ensuring every student could learn in an environment free from prejudice and unfair treatment. Finally, he pressed the intercom one last time. "Please send them in." He stood behind his desk, ready to reveal not just the truth about the glue incident, but to address the deeper issues that had led to this moment. As footsteps approached his door, he straightened his tie, a gesture his son would recognize as preparation for an important moment. The door handle turned, and with it, the opportunity to transform an unfortunate incident into a powerful lesson about judgment, fairness, and the importance of looking beyond our assumptions. What was about to unfold would change more than just one teacher's perspective. It would set a new standard for how Riverside Elementary handled matters of fairness and respect. The tension in the principal's office was thick enough to cut with a knife. Ms. Walsh strode in first, her replacement sweater neat and pressed, clutching her incident report like a shield. The boy followed quietly, his composure remarkable for someone his age. The principal gestured to the two chairs facing his desk, his expression professionally neutral. "Thank you both for coming," he began, his voice steady and measured. "I understand there was an incident involving super glue this morning." He looked down at Ms. Walsh's report, then at his computer screen showing the security footage. "Before we discuss the accusations, I'd like to review some facts." Ms. Walsh sat forward eagerly, ready to present her case. "Sir, I have documented everything. This student has shown a pattern of disruptive behavior, and this vandalism is simply the last straw. I recommend immediate suspension." The principal held up his hand, silencing her mid-sentence. "Let's start with this morning's timeline." He turned his computer monitor so both could see it. "This is our hallway security footage from 10:15 am. The screen showed the lost second-grade student entering the classroom. Ms. Walsh's expression flickered as she watched the child bump into her desk, the glue bottle toppling over. Her lips parted in surprise, but no words came out. During this entire break, the principal continued, switching to another camera view. Our accused student remained at his desk, working on his art project. The footage clearly showed the boy, focused on his work, never leaving his seat. Ms. Walsh's face flushed. I didn't realize, but still, his previous behavior." "Yes, let's discuss previous behavior," the principal interrupted smoothly. He opened a folder on his desk. "I have here several weeks' worth of observations and incidents." He began laying out papers one by one. October 3rd. Student raised hand 12 times in math class, was not called on once. October 10th. Only student required to repeat completed homework in front of class. October 15th. Moved to back of room despite empty front seats and perfect academic record. The color drained from Ms. Walsh's face as she realized these incidents had been documented. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her glasses. I was simply maintaining classroom discipline." The principal leaned forward, his eyes meeting hers directly. "Ms. Walsh, would you say you've treated all students equally in your classroom?" Before she could answer, he pressed a button on his desk phone. "Please send in Mrs. Chen and her student." The door opened, and the young second grader entered with their teacher, still looking nervous about the morning's accident. The child's eyes widened upon seeing Ms. Walsh. "I'm sorry about the glue," they blurted out. "I didn't mean to knock it over. I was scared to say anything." Ms. Walsh's mouth opened and closed, no words coming out. She looked from the child to the boy, then back to the principal, who was watching her reaction carefully. "There's one more thing you should know, Ms. Walsh," the principal said, standing up. He walked around his desk and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "I believe it's time to properly introduce you to my son." The silence that followed was deafening. Ms. Walsh's face went through a range of emotions: shock, disbelief, horror, and finally, the dawning realization of her actions over the past weeks. She gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles turning white. Your son," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "All this time?" "Yes," the principal replied calmly. "We chose not to announce our relationship to give him a chance to be judged on his own merits. Instead, what we've witnessed is a pattern of bias that raises serious concerns about your classroom practices." Ms. Walsh slumped in her chair, the weight of her actions finally hitting her. "I never meant. I didn't realize." "Exactly," the principal said firmly. "You didn't realize many things. You didn't realize that your assumptions about a transfer student were unfounded. You didn't realize that your treatment of him was being documented. And you didn't realize that every report you wrote would come across my desk, not just as a principal, but as a father." The boy sat quietly through this exchange, his dignity intact. He hadn't needed to say a word. The truth had revealed itself, just as his father had taught him it would. Moving forward, the principal continued, "We have some serious discussions ahead about classroom practices and unconscious bias. But first, I believe you owe my son an apology." Ms. Walsh turned to the boy, tears welling in her eyes. "I am so sorry," she said, her voice cracking. "I let my assumptions cloud my judgment. I failed you as a teacher, and I failed myself as an educator." The principal nodded, then looked at his son. "Is there anything you'd like to say?" The boy thought for a moment, then spoke with wisdom beyond his years. "I hope this helps you see that you can't judge anyone without knowing their whole story. Not just me, but any student." His words hung in the air, a powerful lesson for everyone in the room. This wasn't just about clearing his name in the glue incident, it was about exposing the deeper prejudices that had led to this moment. As Ms. Walsh left the office, visibly shaken, the principal and his son shared a look of understanding. Sometimes the best lessons come not from textbooks, but from moments of truth that force us to confront our own biases and assumptions. The story of what happened in the principal's office that day would spread through Riverside Elementary, becoming a catalyst for change that would affect every classroom, every teacher, and every student in the school. But more importantly, it would serve as a reminder that justice, when served with dignity and wisdom, can transform even the most difficult situations into opportunities for growth. The news spread through Riverside Elementary like ripples in a pond. In the days following the revelation in the principal's office, the school atmosphere shifted noticeably. Teachers gathered in small groups during lunch breaks, discussing what had happened in hushed, thoughtful tones. Students whispered in hallways, sharing different versions of the story, each ending with the same powerful twist about the principal's son. Ms. Walsh hadn't returned to classroom 5B, a substitute teacher had taken over, bringing a gentle energy that helped ease the tension left in the wake of recent events. The principal's son continued his studies with quiet dignity, neither boasting about his father's position nor dwelling on past mistreatment. One morning, the principal called an all-staff meeting before classes began. The usually noisy teacher's lounge fell silent as he entered, carrying a thick folder of documents. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, highlighting the serious expressions on everyone's faces. "What happened in room 5B wasn't an isolated incident," he began, his voice firm but compassionate. "It's a wake-up call for all of us." He laid out statistics from the past year: disciplinary actions, classroom assignments, parent complaints, revealing patterns that had gone unnoticed or unaddressed. A young teacher raised her hand. "But we've had diversity training before," she said, voicing what many were thinking. "How is this different?" The principal smiled, but his eyes remained serious. "Because this time, we're not just checking boxes. We're going to look at real situations, real students, and real consequences." He clicked to the first slide of his presentation, showing a simple quote, Every child deserves to be seen for who they are, not who we assume they might be. Over the next few weeks, the school underwent a transformation. The principal brought in educational experts who specialized in unconscious bias and inclusive teaching practices. But these weren't typical PowerPoint presentations and role-playing exercises. Instead, teachers were asked to review actual classroom scenarios, including the documented incidents from Room 5B, with students' names changed to protect privacy. During one particularly powerful session, teachers were asked to read letters from former students who had faced bias in their classrooms. The room grew quiet as educators recognized their own past behaviors in these stories. One veteran teacher wiped away tears as she shared, "I never realized how much weight our assumptions carry." The training extended beyond just teachers. Cafeteria workers, custodians, office staff, everyone who interacted with students participated in the programs. A school is like a family, the principal explained during one session. Every member plays a role in creating an environment where children can thrive. Meanwhile, Ms. Walsh was on administrative leave, but her story wasn't over. Instead of simply dismissing her, the principal had made a different choice. "Change doesn't happen through punishment alone," he told the school board. "It happens through understanding and growth." Ms. Walsh was required to complete an intensive mentorship program with a respected educator who specialized in inclusive teaching practices. She spent hours reviewing her past teaching methods, confronting her biases, and learning new ways to connect with students from all backgrounds. The changes in the school became visible in small but significant ways. Teachers began rotating seating arrangements regularly, ensuring no student felt marginalized. Class participation was tracked to ensure equal opportunities for all students to contribute. Project groups were formed with careful consideration of diverse perspectives and abilities. The library started featuring books about famous educators who had challenged systemic bias in schools. The hallway bulletin boards showcased student work that celebrated differences and promoted understanding. Even the morning announcements included daily quotes about inclusion and respect. One particularly touching moment came when students from different grades collaborated on a mural for the main hallway. The theme was "Our School, Our Family," and it featured intertwined trees with leaves bearing messages of hope and acceptance. The principal's son contributed a leaf that read, "Judge by actions, not assumptions." Parents noticed the changes too. During a PTA meeting, one mother stood up with tears in her eyes. "My child used to hate coming to school," she shared. "Now they can't wait to get here each morning." Similar stories began emerging from other families, proof that the changes were having real impact. The principal kept his office door open more often now, encouraging students and staff to share their experiences, both positive and challenging. "We're not aiming for perfection," he would say. "We're aiming for progress." As the weeks turned into months, Ms. Walsh completed her training and requested a meeting with the principal. She brought with her a detailed plan for her return to teaching, one that included regular classroom observations, student feedback sessions, and continued professional development. "I've learned that good intentions aren't enough," she explained, her voice steady but humble. "We need to actively work to see and support every student." The principal listened carefully, noting how different she seemed from the defensive teacher who had sat in his office that fateful day. The story of Room 5B became part of the school's institutional memory, not as a scandal, but as a turning point. It was discussed during new teacher orientations and referenced in parent meetings. It served as a reminder that change, though sometimes painful, could lead to growth and healing. By the end of the semester, Riverside Elementary had become a model for other schools in the district. Educators from neighboring schools began visiting to observe the new practices in action. The principal's son's experience had sparked a transformation that reached far beyond one classroom, touching countless lives in ways that would continue to ripple outward for years to come. As spring flowers bloomed around Riverside Elementary, the school had blossomed in its own way. 6 months had passed since the super glue incident, and the changes that had taken root were now bearing fruit. The morning sun streamed through classroom windows, illuminating a very different school from the one that had started the year. The principal sat in his office, reviewing the latest batch of student feedback forms, a new practice implemented after the incident. He smiled as he read comments about feeling welcomed, supported, and valued. His son's experience had sparked a transformation that went far beyond what anyone could have expected. In room 5B, now a symbol of change rather than conflict, Ms. Walsh had returned to teaching with a transformed approach. Her classroom walls displayed student work from all skill levels, and her new seating arrangement changed weekly to ensure everyone had a chance to sit at the front. The tension that once filled the room had been replaced by an atmosphere of genuine learning and support. Remember, she often told her students, "Mistakes are how we learn and grow." These words carried extra weight coming from her, as the students knew her own story of learning and change. She had become living proof that people could transform when they confronted their biases and chose to do better. The principal's son, still maintaining his quiet dignity, had become something of an inspiration to his peers. Not because of his father's position, but because of how he had handled unfairness with grace. Other students now felt more confident about speaking up when they saw something wrong, knowing that truth and patience could lead to positive change. During lunch breaks, the cafeteria hummed with a different energy. Students who once stuck to familiar groups now mixed freely, sharing stories and snacks across tables. The lunch staff had been trained to notice when anyone sat alone, gently encouraging connections between students who might not otherwise interact. One particularly meaningful change came in how the school handled new students. A welcome committee of students and teachers now greeted every new arrival, ensuring no one felt like an outsider. "Everyone has a story" became a common phrase in the hallways, reminding both students and staff to look beyond first impressions. The district had taken notice of Riverside's transformation. Other schools began sending teachers to observe and learn. During one such visit, a teacher from another school asked the principal's son what he had learned from everything that happened. He thought for a moment before responding, "Sometimes the hardest moments can teach us the most important lessons. It's not about getting revenge or proving people wrong. It's about making things better for everyone who comes after you." Ms. Walsh, who had once been so resistant to change, now led weekly discussion circles where students could safely share their experiences and concerns. During one session, a quiet student raised their hand and shared how they had felt invisible in their previous school. "But here," they said, "I feel seen." The principal and his son still kept their morning routine of breakfast discussions, but now they talked about the positive changes they saw each day. "You know," his father said one morning, "what happened to you is unfair, but look at how many lives have been touched because of how you handled it." The school's transformation extended to every corner of campus. The library now featured a special section dedicated to books about understanding, empathy, and overcoming prejudice. The playground had buddy benches where students could sit if they wanted company, and there was always someone ready to extend a friendly invitation to play. Parent-teacher conferences took on a new format, with students leading the discussions about their progress and goals. This change helped ensure that every child's voice was heard and valued. Parents reported that their children were more engaged with school than ever before. Even the annual science fair had been reimagined. Instead of just celebrating the winners, the school now highlighted the unique approach and effort of every project. Recognition was given not just for results, but for creativity, perseverance, and collaboration. As the school year drew to a close, the principal organized a special assembly. Instead of the usual awards ceremony, it was a celebration of growth and change. Students and teachers shared stories of how the school had transformed and how they had transformed with it. Ms. Walsh stood at the podium, her voice steady as she addressed the school community. "A year ago, I thought I knew everything about being a teacher," she admitted. "Today, I know that true education happens when we're willing to learn from each other, especially from our mistakes." The principal's son sat in the audience, no longer the new student, no longer the subject of whispers and assumptions. He had become just another part of the vibrant school community, which was exactly what he had wanted from the beginning. In his office after the assembly, the principal added a new frame to his wall. Inside was a simple drawing given to him by a first grader, a picture of diverse stick figures holding hands around Riverside Elementary. Below it, in childish handwriting, were the words, "Our school is like a rainbow, beautiful because of all our different colors." The story of what happened in Room 5B would be retold many times over the years, not as a cautionary tale of bias and accusation, but as a testament to the power of dignity, truth, and transformation. It proved that sometimes the greatest lessons aren't found in textbooks, but in the moments when we choose to learn and grow from our mistakes. As summer approached and another school year drew to a close, Riverside Elementary had become more than just a school. It had become a model of what education could be when everyone committed to seeing and valuing each person's unique story. The super glue incident, which once threatened to divide the school, had instead become the bond that helped hold their community together.